You step into Ogygia, the air immediately thick with the mingled scents of damp stone and something faintly sweet, like decayed incense that has lingered here for centuries. A fine mist curls around the moss-covered pillars, diffusing the sunlight into muted ribbons that play along the cracked surfaces of the ancient walls. Every step you take is softened by the layer of moss underfoot, and the sound of your own quiet breathing seems impossibly loud in the stillness of this forgotten place. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet their silence carries them, whispering faint secrets only the invisible can hear. Ahead, the main terrace opens into a broad courtyard, partially obscured by a low-hanging fog. You notice the patterns etched into the stones, spirals and lines that seem purposeful but defy immediate understanding. Researchers still argue that these markings were either early astronomical charts or purely decorative motifs meant to confuse intruders. You run your fingers along one of the worn carvings, feeling the grooves where countless hands have touched before you, although none could have left a mark as light as yours. There's a chill in the air that brushes across your neck and carries the faint sound of wind rattling through broken roof beams, almost like a sigh. A series of stone steps leads upward to a shadowed doorway. You pause at the threshold, noting the way sunlight hits the edges of the arch, forming a halo that makes the doorway seem both inviting and slightly forbidding. You hear the distant drip of water somewhere deeper within the temple, steady and slow like a heartbeat. The mist moves around you in lazy swirls, and for a moment you imagine time folding back on itself. This courtyard, as vibrant with life centuries ago, children running past these same stones, priests chanting quietly beneath a sunless sky. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You glance around, half expecting a shadow to shift in response, but the temple remains calm, as if acknowledging your presence without intrusion. The texture of the walls is rough beneath your fingertips, flecked with tiny crystals that catch the scattered light. Every pillar and carving is draped in a layer of green, yet you can still make out the delicate forms of animals and symbols etched with painstaking care. It's almost as if the temple itself is breathing, the moss rising and falling in subtle waves with the wind. Your gaze drifts upward to the upper terraces, where stone balustrades crumble gently into the mist. You notice one pillar leaning at an impossible angle, defying what should be gravity, and wonder how it has stayed so long. A low breeze carries the scent of wet earth and flowering vines from somewhere unseen, teasing your senses. The temple feels alive with quiet energy, a place where time has blurred, mixing centuries into a single, suspended present. A soft sound draws your attention, a fleeting flicker of movement near the edge of the terrace. Nothing appears when you look directly, yet the shadow seems to linger just beyond your peripheral vision, teasing the mind with possibilities. You follow the mist along a narrow passage that curls around a partially collapsed wall, feeling the cold stone under your palms, the uneven floor shifting slightly beneath your weight. Each step echoes softly, and the sound fades into the whisper of wind, as though the temple is listening, and yet it does not speak. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch slightly, to peer into the inner courtyard, where a series of statues stand half swallowed by creeping vines. Their faces are eroded, but still hint at serene expressions, frozen in a kind of eternal observation. You wonder what rituals they once oversaw, what offerings they watched vanish into time. In the corner, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting the mist in delicate, rippling patterns. Every tiny disturbance, a drop of water, a flicker of wind, creates shifting light that dances across the stone, hypnotic and gentle. And for a moment, the past and present feel inseparably intertwined. The air carries a subtle chill now, nudging you deeper into the shadows of the temple. You move toward a carved doorway, its lintel etched with symbols half eroded, their meanings uncertain. Myths speak of hidden chambers beneath this threshold, spaces that only reveal themselves under a specific alignment of sunlight, though no one has ever proven it. You slide your fingers along the edge of the doorway, feeling the smoothness where the stone has been worn by time. For a fleeting second, you imagine footsteps from centuries ago mirroring your own, a silent procession of unseen observers who once walked these paths and left their echoes embedded in the stone. You pause at the next corridor, listening. The wind rustles through the broken roof, carrying a sound that almost resembles distant chanting, though you know it is nothing more than the playful shifting of the mist. Still, the suggestion is enough to make you slow your steps, to absorb every detail. The faint scent of damp moss, the texture of weathered stone beneath your fingertips, the muted shimmer of sunlight filtering through cracks above. Here, at the threshold of deeper ruins, you feel both tiny and immense, an invisible witness to a world forgotten but not gone. Your gaze falls on a cracked mosaic floor, faint traces of pigments lingering in the grooves. Reds and blues, muted by time, suggest a pattern you can't quite decipher. Perhaps a map, perhaps a ceremonial path. Researchers still argue about the function of such mosaics, whether they were purely decorative, spiritual guides, or some form of coded instruction. You crouch to inspect it closer, imagining the hands that placed each tile, the quiet deliberation of artists and priests, long vanished, yet somehow whispering through the stone. As you move deeper, the light softens, mist curling around the base of pillars and along fractured steps. Shadows dance across carved reliefs depicting stories of gods, animals, and unknown ceremonies, and you catch glimpses of shapes that seem almost alive in the periphery of vision. You wonder why some carvings survived intact, while others crumbled into indistinguishable fragments, their secrets slipping away like water through fingers. A faint breeze brings the scent of distant flowers, almost sweet against the damp stone, grounding you in this moment of quiet observation. Ahead, a small stairway leads upward toward another terrace, half shrouded in mist. You pause at its base, fingertips brushing the stone railing, feeling the coolness of centuries. You notice a subtle vibration underfoot, the echo of footsteps long past perhaps, or the gentle settling of the ancient ruins themselves. The air smells faintly metallic, like rain on stone, and the light forms an almost ethereal glow across the worn steps. Each step you take seems to merge with the steps of those who once wandered here, and for a moment, the line between observer and participant blurs into a gentle, timeless drift. You glide silently through the fallen hall, where half-collapsed columns lean precariously, draped in thick blankets of moss and delicate climbing vines. The scent of damp stone mingles with the faint tang of decayed wood, and you notice how every surface seems to hum with the weight of centuries. Sunlight filters in through fractured roof beams, scattering in uneven patterns across the floor, creating little patches of warmth amidst the cool shadow. As you move, the uneven stone beneath your feet produces a soft echo, each footfall absorbed by layers of debris and creeping roots. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, but their silence is a narrative all its own, quietly insistent, waiting for an invisible observer like yourself to bear witness. The hall stretches ahead, partially obstructed by rubble and toppled statues. You duck under a fallen lintel, brushing your fingertips along worn carvings depicting serpentine creatures entwined around abstract symbols. The myth says these carvings were guardians of forbidden knowledge, meant to scare away intruders who lacked the understanding to see their meaning. You feel the rough grooves, still retaining the faint warmth of sunlight, and imagine hands centuries past pressing against the same stone with reverence or fear. Researchers still argue that these serpentine forms are symbolic representations of celestial events, yet no consensus has ever been reached. A soft breeze drifts through the open end of the hall, carrying with it the faint, almost imperceptible murmur of shifting stones. You pause, taking in the aroma of wet earth and subtle floral hints that have crept in from the overgrown exterior. The interplay of light and shadow makes the fallen statues seem momentarily alive, eyes half eroded, gazes frozen in thought or accusation, catching the sunlight in fleeting glimmers that vanish when you blink. You crouch to inspect a fragment of a relief on the floor, the depiction of a robed figure holding a staff worn smooth by time. You wonder who this figure once was, what ceremonies they oversaw, what secrets are still trapped in the stone. Through a narrow doorway at the far end of the hall, you glimpse a staircase spiraling upwards, half covered in dust and vines. The steps are slick beneath your fingertips, rough and uneven, yet they lead your gaze skyward. Somewhere above, sunlight pools in a way that makes the upper walls shimmer faintly, like liquid gold. You pause, letting the sensory experience wash over you, the soft echo of your steps, the cool air brushing your cheeks, the subtle scent of damp stone mixed with faint incense still lingering from long-forgotten rituals. Shadows shift in ways that make you question whether they are mere tricks of the light or subtle movements within the stone itself. Along the walls of this hall, you notice shallow niches holding fragments of broken pottery and small, weathered statues. Each seems deliberately placed, though decades or centuries have tried to reclaim them. Legends tell of a hidden chamber beneath this hall where offerings were made to unknown deities, though no one has ever definitively located it. You step closer to one niche, feeling the faint vibration of the floor beneath your palm, as if the temple itself is aware of your presence. A faint whisper seems to drift from the shadows, whether wind or memory, you cannot tell, but it nudges your imagination, a gentle prompt to lean in and observe more closely. A subtle light flickers along the cracked stone, and for a moment you feel as though you are walking in the footsteps of someone who once hid here, silently watching others perform ceremonies you can only guess at. The smooth surface of a fallen lintel under your hand contrasts with the jagged rubble surrounding it, creating a tactile dichotomy that makes you pause and take a slow, deliberate breath. The smell of damp earth fills your nostrils, grounding you in the present, even as your mind drifts across the centuries. You notice a patch of floor where the moss is unusually thick, almost black, and wonder if it covers a hidden inscription or an object lost to time. In the center of the hall, a half-collapsed statue leans at a precarious angle. Its features are worn, but the eyes seem almost alive under the shifting sunlight, glimmering with an unspoken story. You move closer, tracing the contours of its face, noting the small cracks where light penetrates like delicate veins of gold. The myth suggests this figure could whisper truths to those who approached silently, though the reality is far subtler. A shift of shadow, a soft breeze, the quiet pulse of the ancient stones beneath your hands. Researchers still argue whether these statues marked significant historical events or served purely ceremonial purposes, a debate that remains unresolved in the archaeology community. You drift toward a side corridor leading into dimmer territory, where the mist is heavier and the scent of wet stone is more pronounced. You notice how the sound of your movement is swallowed almost entirely, leaving only the faint drip of water from a crack in the roof. Light filters in sporadically, catching on fragments of relief along the walls, revealing shapes of animals, celestial symbols, and ritualistic instruments. Each patch of illumination seems deliberate, as though the temple itself orchestrates a gentle performance just for your eyes. The cool air brushes against your skin, carrying a subtle metallic note that hints at age and mineral content, anchoring you even as your mind drifts into quiet curiosity. A collapsed section of wall opens into a small alcove, barely large enough to step inside. Here, the light is dim, yet a faint shimmer of phosphorescent mineral along the stone hints at hidden colors once vibrant, now dulled by centuries. You crouch, brushing the moss aside, revealing carved symbols nearly erased, but still discernible. The myth speaks of a hidden ritual chamber beneath this alcove, a place where offerings were made to gods whose names are lost. You touch the carvings, feeling their subtle ridges, and imagine the ceremonies that may have been held here, silent and invisible, much like yourself. The corridor narrows further, and the damp scent of earth grows stronger. You feel the uneven floor beneath your feet, notice the faint pulse of dripping water echoing down the stone steps, and observe the interplay of shadow and light as it dances along the walls. Small insects move quietly in the corners, their soft rustling blending into the background, creating a soundtrack for your invisible wandering. You pause at a carved doorway, noting the subtle differences in stone color, perhaps evidence of repair or a secret addition long forgotten. You wonder if anyone else has ever walked here, tracing the same path, feeling the same textures, experiencing the same subtle thrill of discovery. Finally, you reach a raised platform at the far end of the hall. Light spills from a high, broken window, illuminating a fragment of mosaic on the floor. Reds, blues, and yellows remain faintly, forming patterns that suggest a ceremonial layout. Researchers still argue whether such mosaics were purely decorative or part of ritualistic guidance. But here, bathed in the soft glow of filtered sunlight, it feels as though time itself pauses to allow a quiet observation. You crouch, taking in every detail, the uneven tiles, the faint shimmer of residual pigment, the coolness of the stone, the distant drip of water, and feel the gentle, rhythmic pulse of history all around you. You step back and inhale slowly, letting the rich textures, muted light, and damp, earthy scent of the hall sink into your senses. Shadows twist gently across the broken statues, the carved walls, the fallen columns, teasing your imagination with subtle movement. The hallway seems endless, yet safe, a quiet labyrinth where past and present brush against one another. You wonder what secrets remain undiscovered, what mysteries have slipped quietly beneath the moss and stone, and what stories these walls have yet to whisper. With a final glance at the flickering sunlight and the half-collapsed pillars, you drift silently toward the next passage, curiosity tugging gently, inviting you further into Ogyggia's hidden depths. You step carefully down a narrow set of stone stairs, each one slick with moss and thyme, leading into a partially sunken chamber that smells faintly of damp earth and stale incense. The light here is muted, filtering in through cracks in the ceiling above, forming soft shafts that catch dust motes drifting lazily in the air. Your footsteps are almost imperceptible on the uneven floor, absorbed by centuries of accumulated debris, and the distant drip of water echoes like a slow, measured heartbeat. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet in their silence they hum a quiet history, only noticeable to an observer willing to move without disturbance. The chamber opens into a low-ceilinged room where the remnants of a once sacred altar lie half submerged in shallow water. The scent of mineral-rich moisture mingles with the faint aroma of decayed flowers long left as offerings. Researchers still argue whether this submersion was intentional, part of a ritual to honor water deities, or simply the result of shifting foundations over centuries. You run your fingers along the altar's edge, feeling the cold, smooth stone beneath a thin film of water, and notice how tiny cracks have formed intricate patterns across its surface, like veins of some long-forgotten heart. A faint shimmer of light dances across the surface of the water, reflecting mosaics embedded in the stone floor. The myth speaks of offerings that could summon visions when placed on this very altar, though no one has ever confirmed it. You lean closer, inhaling the damp, earthy scent, and feel the cool mist rising from the shallow pool. The water moves slightly, as if stirred by some hidden current, creating a soft, hypnotic ripple that catches your eye. You pause, letting the gentle sounds, the drip of water, the distant whisper of air through cracks, settle around you, feeling almost as though time has paused. Along the chamber walls, faded murals depict ceremonies of long-forgotten gods, their details softened by age, but still evocative. Figures stand in flowing robes, hands raised toward the ceiling, surrounded by symbols whose meanings are lost to time. You notice the way the colors have dulled, yet left subtle traces, reds, ochres, and a faint blue that emerge in the shifting light. A playful thought crosses your mind, imagining a ceremony where a misplaced sandal caused the priest to stumble, though you quickly let the levity dissolve into the hush of the chamber. Shadows stretch across the walls, creating the illusion that the figures move slightly, as if frozen in mid-gesture, but breathing just beyond perception. To the side, a narrow passage leads further into the substructure. You crouch to step inside, feeling the rough, damp stone under your palms. The air cools noticeably, carrying a hint of mineral tang, and the sound of your breath seems amplified in the confined space. Myths claim that a hidden tunnel beneath this chamber once led to the surface, allowing secretive rituals to be performed unseen. You wonder whether it was ever used or if it exists only in the imagination of storytellers and archaeologists piecing together fragments of evidence. A series of small niches lines the walls, each holding fragments of pottery, corroded metal, or faintly carved tokens. You move slowly, brushing your fingers across each artifact, noting the rough edges, the subtle patterns, the careful yet weathered craftsmanship. Researchers still argue about the purpose of these offerings. Were they for protection, guidance, or merely symbolic gestures? Whatever their original intent, they now serve as silent witnesses to centuries of devotion, the quiet echo of human hands that moved with purpose long before you arrived. Water pools deeper along one corner of the chamber, partially concealing a carved stone basin whose surface is etched with tiny, barely perceptible symbols. You bend closer, tracing the carvings with a fingertip, feeling the contrast between the smooth stone and the shallow grooves. Legends tell of blessings received by those who placed their hands on the basin during certain lunar alignments, though no records exist to confirm these rituals. The faint rustle of leaves or shifting vines from above filters down, merging with the slow drip of water to create a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. The far wall is adorned with reliefs of creatures that blend human and animal forms, frozen mid-motion in what seems to be an eternal dance. Sunlight catches on one figure's face, revealing subtle details, a carved smile, the curl of hair, the faint etching of a ceremonial staff. You linger, letting the imagery soak into your senses. A gentle breeze drifts through the cracks above, brushing your skin and carrying the scent of wet stone and something faintly floral. You feel the slow pulse of history beneath your hands, the weight of centuries pressing softly yet insistently against your awareness. Near the center of the chamber, a stone slab juts slightly from the water, polished smooth as though from countless unseen hands brushing over it. You kneel beside it, feeling its coolness and noting a small circular indentation whose purpose is unknown. The myth claims it once held a gemstone that illuminated the chamber at night, though no one has ever discovered evidence of this gem. The soft ripple of water mirrors your gentle movements, distorting your reflection and making the stone seem almost alive. A tiny shadow flits across the far wall, though when you look, nothing is there. Just a trick of light and water, yet enough to make your pulse quicken in the calmest way. A passage along the right-hand wall slopes downward, leading to even darker recesses. You pause at the threshold, feeling the cool moisture in the air intensify, carrying with it the faint scent of minerals and the earthy weight of age. The stone under your fingertips is rough and uneven, textured by centuries of water seeping through cracks above. You step carefully into the passage, noticing the way your shadow stretches along the walls, moving independently as if to remind you that Ogygia is alive in ways subtle and unseen. In this chamber, the air feels thicker, more deliberate. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the gentle rhythm of dripping water and shifting light to anchor your senses. The faint shimmer of light on the wet surfaces creates a delicate pattern that seems almost hypnotic, and you imagine the hands of priests, worshippers, or artisans brushing over the same stone. You wonder what secrets remain hidden beneath the water, what rituals were performed here, and what memories the walls still guard silently. You move toward the center once more, letting the mist curl around your ankles. The faint vibration of the water against stone, combined with the subtle fragrance of moss and minerals, creates a trance-like serenity. Shadows ripple across the carved reliefs and the shallow basin, teasing your imagination with ghostly motions, and for a moment, you are completely immersed in the quiet pulse of this lost sanctuary. Researchers still argue whether this chamber served primarily as a ritual space or a symbolic representation of celestial waters. And here, with only the soft sounds of the temple as witness, the debate feels suspended in time, unresolved, yet mesmerizing. As you rise to leave the chamber, the shafts of light shift, revealing a mosaic along the far edge, partially hidden beneath shallow water. Reds, ochres, and pale blues form a pattern that seems deliberate, a guide or map, though its meaning is obscured by age. You pause, inhaling the cool, mineral-rich air, letting your eyes trace every detail, the tiny cracks, the glimmers of residual pigment, the interplay of shadow and water. With a slow, deliberate step, you move toward the next corridor, curiosity nudging you onward, eager to discover what lies just beyond the threshold of this sunken sanctuary. You ascend the narrow, winding stairway, each step worn smooth by centuries of passage, though now largely hidden beneath creeping moss and scattered debris. The air grows cooler as you climb, carrying a faint metallic tang mixed with the earthy scent of damp stone. Sunlight filters in through occasional cracks in the ceiling, forming irregular shafts that paint golden streaks across the walls. And for a moment, you pause, captivated by the subtle dance of light and shadow. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, but in their quiet presence, they offer a narrative all the same. A whispered history, only perceptible to someone who moves unseen. At the top of the staircase, a narrow corridor opens onto a terrace. You step carefully along the uneven flagstones, feeling the rough texture beneath your fingertips and the faint warmth of sunlight on your cheeks. Ahead, a shadowed stairway leads further upward, seemingly carved into the temple itself, and the edges of the stone shimmer with a soft, almost ethereal glow. Researchers still argue whether this upper passage was meant for ceremonial observation or purely functional access to higher terraces, and you silently wonder which possibility feels truer as you trace your hand along the worn railing. The terrace itself is lined with a series of collapsed pillars, each covered in thick moss that seems to pulse gently with life. You notice delicate vines creeping between the cracks, twisting in patterns almost too precise to be random. The myth says that these pillars once held protective spirits, their essence trapped within the stone, though of course no evidence of this has ever been found. You kneel beside one pillar, brushing your fingertips across its rough surface, feeling tiny bumps and hollows that tell of weather, human touch, and slow centuries of erosion. The cool breeze carries the scent of distant wildflowers, mingling with the dampness of stone and hinting at a world beyond these ruins. A small alcove near the edge of the terrace catches your eye. Inside, a fragment of a mosaic floor glows faintly under the scattered sunlight. Reds, ochres, and pale blues form an intricate geometric pattern, mostly obscured by debris and moss, yet still discernible if you look closely. You crouch, letting your fingers trace the subtle ridges, imagining the careful hands that once laid these tiles. Researchers still argue whether such mosaics were used as ceremonial guides or simply decorative accents, and you feel the gentle pull of mystery as your eyes wander over the intricate patterns, noting the tiny variations and imperfections that hint at human labor long past. As you move along the terrace, a sudden shadow flickers at the edge of your vision. You glance quickly, expecting to see a bird or some passing creature, yet nothing appears. Only the shifting of the sunlight across broken stone and creeping moss could explain it, but the subtle sensation raises goosebumps along your arms in the gentlest way. You inhale the air deeply, tasting the faint mineral tang of weathered stone and the hint of something sweet and floral from the vines overhead. The terrace feels suspended in time, a liminal space where centuries collapse into a single serene moment. You approach the shadowed stairway, peering upward toward where it ascends beyond sight. The stone steps are irregular, some cracked, some worn smooth by the passage of countless hands. A low, almost imperceptible wind curls down from above, carrying the whisper of leaves and a faint echo of distant water. You pause at the base of the stairs, noticing tiny carvings along the side walls, delicate spirals, abstract symbols, and faint depictions of human figures in ceremonial poses. Legends speak of these carvings being a map of the temple's higher levels, guiding only those who truly observe carefully, though no one has verified this. You wonder if, by moving silently, you are participating in an ancient ritual of observation, unknowingly following in the footsteps of those long gone. Ascending slowly, you feel the cool stone beneath your palms, damp from moisture that seeps from unseen cracks. The scent of wet earth intensifies as you climb, mingling with faint traces of incense that have lingered stubbornly across centuries. The narrow stairway curves slightly, creating a gentle, almost imperceptible sense of vertigo. Shadows pool in the corners, flickering as the sunlight shifts, giving the impression of movement where none exists. You pause midway, letting your eyes adjust to the changing light, observing the interplay of shadow and stone as if the walls themselves are breathing, slowly exhaling secrets you cannot yet fully grasp. At the top of the stairway, a landing opens to a higher terrace. You step out carefully, feeling the uneven stone beneath your feet, rough and cool. The view stretches across the ruins, distant terraces shrouded in mist, half obscured by overgrown vegetation. A toppled pillar glints in the sunlight, moss covering one side, and you imagine the careful hands that once carved it. Researchers still argue whether these terraces were used primarily for ceremonial observation or as defensive vantage points, a debate that adds a soft, tantalizing edge of uncertainty to your quiet exploration. A delicate breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wet stone, moss, and something faintly floral, teasing your senses and drawing your attention to a faint shimmer along the edge of a collapsed wall. You lean closer, noticing small, incised symbols etched into the stone, worn smooth but still legible with effort. The myth suggests these symbols contained protective blessings, intended to shield the temple and its treasures from outsiders. You brush away a layer of dust, feeling the rough, pitted texture beneath your fingertips, and notice how the sunlight catches on subtle cracks, creating tiny glimmers like scattered stars across the stone. You continue along the terrace, observing a partially collapsed alcove that hints at hidden chambers beyond. The light is soft here, diffused by creeping vines that filter the sunlight, casting a gentle green glow across the stone. The air carries a faint hum, or perhaps it is the echo of your own movements, blending with the soft murmur of distant water somewhere deep within the temple. Shadows twist across the walls, subtle and teasing, forming shapes that disappear when looked at directly. You wonder what secret still hides behind the remaining stone, just out of reach, waiting for an invisible observer to notice. A small fountain, long dry, sits in the center of this upper terrace. Its basin is cracked and overgrown, but you notice faint remnants of carved patterns along its rim. The myth claims that water once flowed here in ritual abundance, but centuries of neglect have left it still and silent. You trace the carvings, feeling the delicate textures, and imagine ceremonies long forgotten, their participants now merely whispers in the stone. The sun shifts slowly, light scattering across the terrace and illuminating moss, broken tiles, and jagged edges with soft brilliance. Near the far edge of the terrace, a partially obstructed passage curves inward, leading to a shadowed alcove. You step toward it, feeling the cool air shift against your skin and hearing the soft rustle of vines above. Faint patterns on the walls hint at another small mosaic or ceremonial marker, though time has blurred the details. Researchers still argue about whether these side passages were meant for private rites, storage, or symbolic journeys, and as you pause at the threshold, you feel a quiet pull, a gentle curiosity urging you forward. Finally, you reach a point where the terrace seems to dissolve into mist, the ruins stretching out below in fog-shrouded patterns. The light forms soft, golden streaks across distant stone and collapsed pillars, while the scent of damp earth and faint flora mingles in the air. You pause, letting the serenity of this elevated vantage soak into your senses. The cool stone under your fingers, the warmth of sunlight on your cheeks, the gentle sound of wind and distant dripping water. Shadows flicker subtly along broken carvings, and for a moment, the lost city feels suspended in an almost dreamlike stillness. With a deep, slow breath, you follow the terrace as it curves toward the next stairway, anticipation humming gently beneath your skin. You wonder what mysteries lie in the upper chambers, what carvings and relics remain unseen, and what stories these shadowed stones are yet to whisper. The soft rhythm of your movement blends with the quiet pulse of the temple, and you drift along the corridor, ready to explore what lies beyond, silently observing, as if no one else could ever witness this ancient, sunlit realm. You enter a quiet alcove tucked into the temple's upper level, where a cracked idol stands upon a pedestal, partially swallowed by creeping vines. The air here is cooler, tinged with the faint metallic scent of stone that has weathered centuries, and the soft rustle of leaves from above mingles with distant echoes of dripping water. Sunlight filters through a narrow window, glinting off the fractured surface of the idol, making it appear as though it emits a gentle, otherworldly glow. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, but the idol seems to hum its own silent narrative, a quiet presence that hints at forgotten ceremonies and long-lost devotion. The idol's features are worn smooth, but subtle details emerge. The curve of a serene face, the angle of a raised hand, traces of color still clinging faintly in the cracks. Legends whisper that this figure shifts ever so slightly at night, aligning with celestial movements or perhaps responding to unseen observers. You crouch closer, feeling the rough texture of weathered stone beneath your fingertips, noting the way the air seems to vibrate with the weight of centuries. Researchers still argue that such idols served purely ritualistic purposes versus acting as markers of astronomical events, and the ambiguity adds a soft thrill to your quiet observation. A narrow passage leads from the alcove toward the temple's inner sanctum. The floor is slick with moss, and each step releases a faint, satisfying crunch of dislodged pebbles. The faint light from above catches the edges of small carvings on the walls, spirals, interlocking shapes, and delicate animal forms that seem to dance in the shifting shadows. The myth suggests that the carvings could act as guides to secret chambers, but no one has confirmed their function. You brush your hand along one sequence, feeling the shallow grooves and imagining the hands that etched them so long ago. The subtle, damp scent of stone and earth anchors you in the present, even as your mind drifts across centuries of worship and human presence. The corridor widens into a small chamber where fragments of a mosaic decorate the floor in faded reds, blues, and ochres. A gentle breeze drifts through a cracked window, stirring the air and carrying faint floral notes from vines creeping along the temple's exterior. You lean closer to examine the mosaic, noticing patterns that suggest a ceremonial path or perhaps an abstract map. Researchers still argue whether these designs were purely decorative or part of a ritualistic layout, and your fingers trace the uneven tiles, feeling their cold smoothness and subtle indentations left by hands long gone. The light shifts, catching a fragment of reflective mineral in the floor, creating a flicker that seems almost alive. Near the chamber's edge, a narrow staircase curves upward, leading to a shadowed balcony. The walls here are etched with tiny, almost imperceptible symbols, each worn by time, yet still faintly legible. Myths speak of these symbols holding protective powers, ensuring that sacred knowledge would remain hidden from the uninitiated. You brush away a thin layer of dust, feeling the jagged edges and smooth depressions beneath your fingertips, and wonder if the temple itself watches. Subtle vibrations in the stone hinting at life beyond the visible. A soft whisper of wind carries the faintest echo of movement, though nothing shifts visibly, teasing your imagination in the gentlest way. On the balcony, the view stretches over collapsed pillars, terraces, and partially obscured courtyards, mist curling lazily across the distant stones. You inhale the scent of wet earth mingled with faint sweet floral undertones, and notice how sunlight catches on the moss, creating miniature halos on the surfaces it touches. Shadows stretch and retreat along carved reliefs, forming fleeting patterns that your mind interprets as dancing figures. A silent performance orchestrated by light and time. You pause, feeling the cool stone railing beneath your palms and letting the ambient sounds, the soft rustle of vines, distant water, and gentle wind settle around you. To your left, a low doorway leads into a recessed alcove where fragments of pottery and weathered statues are arranged as if for silent observation. The myth claims that these items were offerings to gods of protection, fertility, and harvest, though evidence remains speculative. You crouch, feeling the rough textures and faint warmth where sunlight touches the surfaces, noticing tiny chips and scratches that hint at centuries of handling. Researchers still argue whether these offerings were intentional or merely symbolic placeholders, and the uncertainty only deepens your fascination with the space. The chamber beyond the alcove is dim, with light entering through narrow cracks that form thin shafts across the floor. You notice a small basin partially filled with water, its surface reflecting the faint shimmer of sunlight and creating ripples that seem to move independently of any breeze. Legends speak of this basin as a ritual tool, capable of revealing visions when touched under specific alignments. Though no proof exists, you press a fingertip to the water, feeling the gentle chill spread across your skin, and watch the ripples distort your reflection, merging your image with the ancient patterns etched into the stone. Along the far wall, a carved niche holds a cracked statue draped in ivy. Its expression is serene yet inscrutable, almost as if it knows you are watching but remains indifferent. You brush the vines aside, feeling the coarse texture against your fingertips, and note the faint shimmer of mineral deposits catching the sunlight. A playful thought crosses your mind. Perhaps the statue blinks when you aren't looking, just to keep its secrets. Shadows twist subtly across the wall behind it, giving the impression of movement in the stone itself. Researchers still argue whether such niches were intended as private shrines or merely decorative, and the ambiguity adds a delicate thrill to your silent exploration. The faint sound of dripping water grows more distinct as you move toward a narrow corridor leading downward. The stone floor becomes slick and uneven, each step cautious and deliberate. You notice a subtle change in temperature. The cool air deepens, carrying a faint scent of minerals and wet moss. Light shifts softly through small cracks in the ceiling, forming irregular beams that illuminate carvings and reliefs in gentle flashes. The interplay of shadow and illumination makes the figures seem alive, frozen mid-motion, and you can't help but lean in closer, tracing each subtle curve and groove with your fingertips. A small opening in the wall reveals a hidden staircase spiraling further upward. You pause at the base, feeling the stone under your hands and noting the way the air hums softly as though aware of your presence. Legends suggest that ascending these stairs could bring you closer to sacred insight, yet no one has definitively verified what lies above. You trace the worn steps carefully, feeling the subtle shift in elevation, the smooth erosion under your palms, and the gentle tug of curiosity urging you onward. A faint breeze brushes your cheek, carrying with it scents of earth and distant flowers, grounding you in this quiet exploration. Near the top, the stairway opens onto a small balcony where sunlight spills across the terrace below, illuminating broken pillars and fragmented statues with soft brilliance. The air is fresh and carries the delicate perfume of overgrown vegetation. Shadows of distant ruins stretch lazily across the floor, creating a serene, dreamlike pattern that shifts with the movement of the sun. You lean against the railing, feeling the cool stone beneath your hands, and let your gaze wander, noticing every tiny detail, the moss climbing in intricate patterns, the subtle shimmer of mineral deposits, the gentle flicker of light across worn mosaics. Here, the temple feels suspended in time, a liminal space where past and present brush against one another. You pause, letting the serene sounds, the soft rustle of leaves, distant water, faint bird calls, anchor you. Shadows twist gently across carved reliefs, teasing your imagination with subtle motion. You wonder what stories remain hidden in the stone, what ceremonies were performed in silence, and what secrets this glowing alcove has kept across the centuries. The gentle pulse of history surrounds you, quiet but insistent, urging you to move forward, deeper into the temple's mysteries. You step through a narrow archway into a long, shadowed corridor, the air cool and slightly damp against your skin. The stone walls are etched with delicate spirals and abstract symbols, worn smooth in some places and deeply carved in others, their meaning lost to time. Sunlight filters in through small openings above, creating fragmented beams that cut across the floor and walls, highlighting dust motes drifting lazily in the warm air. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke. Yet in the quiet interplay of light, shadow, and texture, the corridor hums with ancient whispers, subtle and persistent. The floor beneath your feet is uneven, composed of large flagstones that shift slightly under your weight. Tiny pools of water collect in low spots, reflecting the sunlight in shimmering, distorted patterns. You crouch to examine one, noticing the faint outline of a mosaic fragment beneath the surface, reds and ochres forming the hint of a geometric pattern. Myths claim that these hidden mosaics were once part of a celestial map, guiding the movements of temple priests during sacred rituals, though no records confirm it. Researchers still argue whether the designs were purely symbolic or had functional ceremonial purposes, and the debate adds a soft, tantalizing edge to your quiet observation. Along the corridor walls, small niches hold fragments of statues, pottery shards, and weathered carvings. You run your fingers over them, feeling the rough texture and subtle variations in depth, and notice how the remnants of color cling faintly to the stone. A hint of blue here, a whisper of red there. Legends speak of offerings left to appease protective spirits, but time has claimed the physical evidence, leaving only traces to tease your imagination. You lean in closer to a small statue, noting how its eroded features suggest both serenity and watchfulness, as if silently observing the corridor itself. A soft draft stirs from the far end, carrying the scent of damp stone and faint vegetation creeping from the temple's exterior. The corridor bends slightly, and the play of light and shadow creates the illusion of movement along the walls. You pause, listening to the subtle echo of dripping water and the whisper of wind through cracks above. Shadows shift, teasing the edges of your vision, forming shapes that vanish when you look directly, yet their fleeting presence awakens a gentle curiosity. You imagine the priests or guardians who may have once walked these halls, leaving traces that time and memory have preserved in these subtle vibrations. Midway through, a small alcove emerges, revealing a cracked basin partially filled with water. The surface glimmers faintly, reflecting scattered light onto the surrounding walls. You kneel beside it, feeling the smooth stone beneath your hands, cool and damp. The myth suggests that water drawn from this basin could reveal visions when combined with moonlight, though no one has substantiated such claims. A faint ripple spreads across the surface as you touch it, creating a soft, mesmerizing pattern, and you pause to let the hypnotic effect settle into your senses. Researchers still argue whether such basins served functional or purely symbolic purposes, and the ambiguity deepens the corridor's quiet allure. Continuing onward, the corridor opens slightly, revealing a collapsed section where vines and moss creep over fallen stones. You step carefully, noticing the subtle difference in texture between the intact flagstones and the broken, jagged fragments beneath your feet. The air grows cooler here, with a faint metallic note that hints at mineral deposits or hidden chambers beyond. Shadows flicker across the uneven surfaces, forming fleeting patterns that suggest movement, and you feel a playful sense of anticipation, as if the corridor itself is teasing you with the secrets it guards. To your right, a set of carved steps descends into a lower chamber. You follow them slowly, feeling the cool stone under your palms and noting how the air becomes more humid, carrying a faint, earthy scent. Light filters from above in narrow shafts, highlighting tiny carvings along the walls depicting human-animal hybrid figures, celestial motifs, and ceremonial instruments. The myth speaks of these figures as guardians of hidden knowledge, watching silently over those who dared to explore. You trace the carvings, feeling the subtle grooves and bumps beneath your fingertips, imagining the ritual significance they might have once held. The lower chamber is partially flooded, the water reflecting dim sunlight and casting shifting patterns across the stone walls. You step lightly, careful not to disturb the still surface, and notice fragments of pottery and corroded metal embedded in the mud. Legends claim these items were offerings to gods of fertility and protection, though no archaeological evidence confirms the specific ritual. Researchers still argue whether the flooding was intentional for ceremonial purposes or a natural result of structural collapse. You pause, letting the damp scent, the soft sound of lapping water, and the flickering light wash over you, a gentle sensory immersion in a forgotten past. A narrow passage curves around the far side of the chamber, partially obstructed by fallen stones. You maneuver carefully, feeling the rough stone under your hands and hearing the subtle drip of water echoing through the corridor. The walls here are etched with faint symbols that appear almost microscopic, requiring careful inspection to discern their shapes. Myths suggest these symbols were a secret code meant to be read only by initiates, though their meaning has been lost. The interplay of light and shadow brings them to life briefly, and you pause to examine each one, savoring the delicate interplay of history, myth, and imagination. Near the center of the chamber, a worn statue leans against the wall, partially submerged in water. Its features are eroded, yet the faint outline of an enigmatic smile remains. You crouch to feel the rough stone beneath your fingertips, noticing subtle carvings along the base. The myth claims that this statue could whisper guidance to those who approached in silence, though the voice, if ever real, is now lost to time. Shadows stretch across the walls, creating fleeting illusions of movement, and you pause, letting the quiet tension dissolve into wonder. You notice a small mosaic embedded in the stone floor, its colors muted but still discernible. Faint reds, ochres, and pale blues forming a geometric pattern. Researchers still argue whether these designs were functional guides for ceremonies or simply decorative embellishments, a question that remains unresolved yet adds a gentle thrill to your silent observation. The cool water laps gently at the edges, carrying the faint scent of moss and minerals, and you take a deep, slow breath, letting the calm rhythm of the chamber anchor your senses. At the far end, a narrow staircase spirals upward, its steps slick with moss and moisture. You trace the worn edges with your fingertips, noting the subtle curves worn smooth by countless hands across centuries. Light filters in from above, creating tiny glimmers along cracks and crevices, illuminating fragments of carvings depicting robed figures and abstract celestial symbols. You move slowly, deliberately, letting the cool air, faint scents, and soft soundscape guide your focus, attuned to every subtle detail. Ascending the stairs, the passage opens onto a balcony overlooking a sunken courtyard. Mist curls lazily across broken pillars and fragmented walls, and faint sunlight filters through, creating pools of warm illumination that contrast with the cool, shadowed corners. The air carries the faint perfume of overgrown flora, mixing with the earthy scent of damp stone. Shadows stretch and twist across the terrace, forming ephemeral patterns that your mind interprets as dancing figures, a quiet performance orchestrated by time itself. Finally, you pause at the edge of the balcony, feeling the cool stone under your hands and the soft breeze brushing your face. The corridor behind you seems to whisper of the mysteries still waiting deeper in the ruins, and your curiosity is gently piqued. You lean slightly, observing the interplay of light, shadow, water, and moss, letting the subtle sounds and scents fill your awareness. A soft thought drifts across your mind. What secret still hides beyond the next passage? The temple, ever silent, holds its answer close, inviting you to move forward, silently, gently, into the unknown. You step into a broader chamber, the ceiling rising high above, where sunlight filters through cracks in the stone roof, casting delicate beams that illuminate floating dust motes. The air here is cooler and carries the subtle scent of damp earth mixed with something faintly floral, like blossoms long past their season. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the space hums softly with the echo of centuries, a quiet resonance you feel more than hear. Each step on the uneven stone floor sends a tiny vibration through the air, reminding you that the temple has felt countless footsteps long before yours. In the center of the chamber, a towering statue dominates the space, its features eroded, yet still commanding. Moss climbs along its base, creating a living contrast to the weathered stone, while faint traces of color cling to crevices, hinting at the vibrancy it may once have held. Legends suggest that during certain celestial alignments, sunlight would strike the statue at a precise angle, revealing secret carvings hidden in shadow. Researchers still argue whether the phenomenon was intentional or coincidental, yet you can't help but watch as light and shadow play along the surface, teasing shapes almost too precise to dismiss as accident. Along the walls, you notice niches filled with broken artifacts, fragments of pottery, corroded metal, and faintly carved tokens. Each piece bears the weight of human hands that touched them long ago, their stories now only implied through texture and placement. The myth speaks of offerings meant to secure favor or protection, though no evidence confirms the specific rituals. You bend closer to examine a small chipped vase, feeling its smooth curves and rough edges, letting the faint scent of mineral-rich dust rise to meet your senses. The interplay of touch, sight, and faint sense envelops you in a soft, immersive rhythm. A low doorway at the chamber's far end beckons. You step through, cautiously, the air growing cooler, damp and slightly metallic, hinting at water or mineral deposits nearby. Sunlight catches on faint carvings along the doorframe, highlighting abstract shapes and robed figures whose expressions remain enigmatic despite centuries of erosion. Myths claim these figures represent guardians of hidden knowledge, watching silently as the temple's secrets remain locked away. You run your hand along the carved stone, noting subtle ridges and indentations, imagining the meticulous care that once shaped each detail. Researchers still argue whether the figures were meant to guide worshippers or ward off intruders, and you smile softly at the ambiguity. Beyond the doorway, a narrow corridor descends in a gentle spiral, leading to a partially submerged chamber. The floor is slick with moss and shallow water, reflecting thin shafts of light that make the space feel almost liquid. The faint scent of wet stone mingles with earthy aromas, and each careful step produces a gentle splash or ripple. You pause, observing the interplay of light on the water's surface, the reflections of carvings and mosaics distorted in mesmerizing patterns. The myth claims that placing your hand on the water in the right spot can reveal visions of past ceremonies, though, of course, no one has verified this. A series of small alcoves lines the walls of the submerged chamber, each holding fragments of statues or tiny ceremonial items. You kneel beside one alcove, brushing away a layer of silt and moss to reveal delicate carvings etched into the stone. The features are faint: a tiny hand, a hint of an elaborate headdress, but enough to spark imagination. Researchers still argue whether these niches were meant for ritual display or symbolic remembrance, and the debate only heightens your quiet fascination. The water lapping softly against stone creates a hypnotic rhythm, its gentle motion almost like a lullaby carried across centuries. In the center of the chamber lies a stone basin, cracked but partially intact, its surface etched with faint symbols. You trace the grooves with your fingertips, feeling the subtle variations in depth, the cold smoothness beneath your touch. Legends suggest that these symbols were protective sigils, intended to shield the temple and its treasures from unseen forces. The faint sound of dripping water echoes in the chamber, accompanied by occasional whispers of wind through distant cracks, teasing the edges of perception. Shadows flicker along the walls as light shifts, creating the illusion of movement and adding a delicate tension that softens into wonder. Toward the far end, you notice a partially collapsed staircase leading to an upper level. Moss and vines crawl along the edges, softening the harshness of the broken stone. The air here carries the faint scent of damp earth and distant flowers, and sunlight slants through gaps above, illuminating the stairs in warm, shifting patterns. You step carefully, fingers grazing the cool stone, noting tiny carvings along the walls depicting celestial symbols, human figures, and abstract motifs. Myths suggest these were instructional guides for ritual practices, though evidence remains speculative. Researchers still argue whether these carvings had practical or purely symbolic purposes, adding a gentle layer of intrigue. At the top, the passage opens onto a sunlit terrace, where broken pillars and scattered stones suggest the remains of an ancient gallery. Mist curls lazily along the edges, catching the sunlight in golden tendrils, and the scent of moss, whetstone, and faint flora fills the air. You pause, letting your fingers trail along a moss-covered railing, observing tiny veins of mineral deposits glinting in the soft light. Shadows twist across fractured walls, forming fleeting shapes that tease your imagination, hinting at figures frozen mid-motion in the memory of the temple. A low alcove at the terrace's edge contains a cracked idol, its features softened by centuries, yet still emanating an undeniable presence. You approach quietly, tracing its eroded features with your fingertips. Legends say that during certain hours, the idol's gaze aligns with the sun, revealing hidden inscriptions invisible at other times. Researchers still argue whether this alignment was intentional or coincidental, and as you observe the interplay of light across the stone, the ambiguity feels magical rather than frustrating. Nearby, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting shards of sunlight in a subtle mosaic across the floor. You lean over it, tracing the gentle ripples and observing faint reflections of broken pillars and distant terraces. The myth claims these reflections once served as portals for spiritual visions, though no one has verified the story. The air is heavy with scent, whetstone, moss, faint floral undertones, and the gentle rhythm of dripping water lulls your senses, grounding you in the quiet pulse of this forgotten sanctuary. You continue along the terrace, noticing small fragments of carvings embedded in collapsed walls. The figures, partially obscured by moss, depict robed individuals holding ceremonial instruments, their expressions serene yet inscrutable. You trace their outlines gently, feeling the faint grooves beneath your fingertips. Shadows shift across the broken stones as the sun moves, creating the illusion of movement, and you pause to savor the subtle, fleeting dance. Researchers still argue whether these figures represented historical participants or symbolic archetypes, and you smile softly at the uncertainty, letting your imagination fill in the gaps. Toward the end of the terrace, a narrow stairway spirals upward, its edges slick with moss and rainwater. You follow it carefully, feeling the cool stone under your hands and listening to the soft echo of distant dripping water. Light slants through overhead cracks, illuminating faded mosaics and tiny carvings along the walls. Legends speak of a chamber above that holds the most sacred relics, though no one has confirmed its existence. You move slowly, letting the gentle pull of curiosity guide you, attuned to every subtle texture, sound, and scent along the way. Finally, you reach a small landing where the sun filters through an opening to reveal distant ruins, partially shrouded in mist. The interplay of shadow, light, and fog creates a surreal, dreamlike vista. Broken pillars, scattered tiles, moss-covered walls, and glimpses of hidden corridors hint at secrets still waiting to be discovered. You pause, feeling the cool stone beneath your fingertips, inhaling the mingling scents of moss, earth, and distant flora. A soft whisper of wind brushes past your cheek, carrying with it the quiet thrill of unseen mysteries, urging you gently forward into the next passage of exploration. You step through a moss-covered archway into a shadowed courtyard, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and faint wildflowers. Broken pillars rise sporadically from the ground, their surfaces etched with weathered carvings that glint subtly in shafts of sunlight. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the quiet interplay of shadow, stone, and creeping vines hums a narrative all its own. The soft rustle of leaves above and the distant drip of water from a fractured roof create a gentle rhythm, guiding your invisible footsteps through the ancient space. A tilted stone platform draws your attention. Its surface is cracked, moss-covered, and uneven, yet traces of intricate carvings remain visible, swirling patterns and faint figures, their purpose lost to time. Legends whisper that these platforms were stages for ceremonial dances or celestial observations, though no records confirm the details. Researchers still argue whether the platform's alignment with distant ruins had astronomical significance or was purely decorative. You kneel beside it, running your fingers along the carved grooves, feeling the smooth depressions and subtle textures, while sunlight catches flecks of mineral embedded in the stone, creating the illusion of tiny sparks dancing beneath your touch. Along the courtyard's edge, fragments of a collapsed wall form a shadowed alcove. You approach cautiously, feeling the uneven stones underfoot and inhaling the mingling scents of damp moss and sun-warmed rock. Inside, a shattered idol leans against the wall, its features softened by centuries of erosion, yet retaining a serene, almost knowing expression. Myths speak of protective spirits inhabiting these idols, their presence lingering even as the physical form crumbles. You trace the curves of its eroded face, imagining the devotion of those who once approached it with reverence. The subtle weight of history presses gently around you, comforting rather than oppressive. A narrow passage curls away from the courtyard, leading to a partially sunken chamber. The air grows cooler and heavier, carrying a faint mineral scent from water that has seeped through centuries-old cracks. You step carefully over slick stones and shallow puddles, noting the soft ripple of light as it refracts across damp walls. A fragment of mosaic catches your eye, tiny reds and ochres forming abstract shapes that seem to pulse subtly in the shifting illumination. Researchers still argue whether these designs served ceremonial guidance or decorative purposes, and the debate adds a quiet thrill to your unobtrusive observation. In the chamber's center lies a cracked basin, partially filled with rainwater. Its surface shimmers in scattered sunlight, reflecting the ceiling's carved motifs in distorted, hypnotic patterns. Legends claim that these basins could reveal hidden truths when touched under specific alignments, though no verification exists. You dip a finger lightly into the water, feeling the coolness spread along your skin, and watch the ripples scatter across the reflected carvings, merging past and present in a subtle, dreamlike display. Shadows twist at the edges of your vision, forming fleeting, almost imperceptible shapes that vanish when directly observed. Toward the back of the chamber, a low doorway opens into a narrow spiral staircase, its steps slick with moss and uneven from centuries of use. You ascend carefully, feeling the rough stone beneath your fingertips and noting faint carvings along the walls, abstract human and animal forms intertwined in geometric patterns. The myth says these carvings encoded guidance for temple initiates, though the specifics remain unknown. Researchers still argue whether they functioned as instruction, decoration, or symbolic guardians, and the uncertainty deepens your fascination with the silent space. Emerging at the top, you find a small terrace with collapsed pillars scattered across the surface. Mist curls lazily along the edges, refracting sunlight into soft golden hues. The air carries the faint aroma of damp earth and distant blooms, mingling with the cool stone under your palms. Shadows stretch along fractured walls, forming ephemeral shapes that tease your imagination. Figures frozen mid-motion, paused in a story lost to time. You take a slow breath, letting the gentle rhythm of ambient sounds, rustling leaves, dripping water, distant birdsong, settle around you. At the far side of the terrace, a cracked statue leans against a broken wall, partially cloaked in vines. You approach quietly, brushing away creeping moss to reveal faint features and delicate carvings at its base. Legends suggest that the statue was once a guardian of sacred relics, its gaze protecting the temple's hidden treasures. You run your fingers over its weathered surface, feeling the subtle undulations and pits left by erosion. Shadows flicker softly across its face, creating an almost lifelike shimmer that makes you pause, captivated by the gentle tension of the moment. A narrow corridor leads from the terrace toward an inner sanctum. The floor is uneven, strewn with debris and small stones that crunch softly beneath your careful steps. The air is damp, carrying the faint scent of mineral-rich water seeping from hidden cracks. Light filters in through gaps above, forming narrow shafts that illuminate small mosaics along the walls, reds, blues, and ochres that form abstract geometric patterns. Myths claim these mosaics were guides for ritual movement, yet evidence remains speculative. Researchers still argue whether they served practical or symbolic functions, and the ambiguity only heightens your quiet intrigue. You follow the corridor, fingers brushing lightly along the cool stone walls, tracing faint carvings of robed figures and celestial motifs. The subtle play of light and shadow transforms them momentarily, lending them movement and life. A soft draft carries a faint floral scent, mingling with the earthy smell of damp stone and moss. You pause, listening to the gentle drip of water and the distant rustle of leaves outside, letting these ambient elements weave into your awareness like a delicate ASMR melody. A small alcove to the right reveals fragments of ceremonial artifacts, chipped pottery, corroded metal, and faded carvings. You crouch, examining each piece carefully, feeling their textures under your fingertips. Legends speak of offerings left for gods of protection and fertility, though the true purpose remains a matter of conjecture. Researchers still argue about the precise function of these objects, and the ongoing debate adds a subtle thrill to your quiet, hidden journey through the ruins. Toward the end of the corridor, a narrow spiral staircase ascends to a higher terrace, its edges slick with moss. You follow slowly, feeling each worn step and noting how light filters through cracks above, illuminating tiny mineral veins in the stone. Carvings along the walls depict abstract human and animal forms, intertwined with celestial symbols. Myths suggest these stairs were part of an initiatory path, though no one can confirm what ceremonies occurred here. You pause occasionally, letting your senses absorb the subtle interplay of texture, scent, and light. At the terrace above, broken pillars rise sporadically, partially shrouded in mist. The air carries the combined aroma of wet stone, moss, and distant blooms. Shadows stretch and twist across fractured walls, forming fleeting, ephemeral patterns. You lean against a cool railing, letting your gaze wander over scattered ruins below, imagining the lives, ceremonies, and secrets they have silently observed. The soft, hypnotic rhythm of dripping water, distant wind and rustling leaves blends with your own quiet breathing, grounding you in this moment of serene observation. Finally, you approach a narrow passage, partially hidden behind a fallen pillar. Beyond it, the light fades gently, shadows deepening into a quiet hush that seems to invite further exploration. You pause, feeling the cool stone beneath your fingers and inhaling the mingling scents of earth, moss, and faint flowers. A soft whisper of wind brushes past your cheek as if urging you forward. You wonder what mysteries lie beyond, what secrets the temple still holds, and you step silently towards the unknown, ready to continue your gentle, invisible journey. You move through the narrow, shadowed passage, the air growing cooler and tinged with a faint mineral scent. Small cracks in the stone walls let in thin beams of sunlight that shimmer across the uneven floor, highlighting moss and tiny fragments of carvings. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet in the quiet interplay of shadow and light, you sense the lingering pulse of centuries. Each step echoes softly, a gentle reminder that the space has absorbed countless footsteps before yours, and perhaps will long outlast them. The passage opens into a vaulted chamber, its ceiling high and partially collapsed, letting in slivers of sunlight that dapple the floor. In the center stands a fractured statue, draped in creeping ivy. Its features are softened by time, yet a serene, knowing expression remains, catching the light in subtle, almost hypnotic ways. Myths speak of the statue as a guardian of knowledge, silently observing all who enter. You kneel to examine it, running your fingers along eroded stone, feeling faint grooves that once held intricate details. Researchers still argue whether these statues marked sacred spaces or served merely decorative purposes, and the ambiguity adds a gentle thrill to your quiet observation. Along the chamber walls, small alcoves hold fragments of pottery, corroded metallic objects, and faint carvings. The smell of damp earth and faint floral notes wafts through the air as you approach, brushing away moss to reveal hidden details. Legends claim that these alcoves contained offerings to gods of fertility and protection, though no written record confirms the specifics. You feel the subtle textures beneath your fingertips, smooth, worn pottery, jagged stone edges, and the cool embrace of carved niches. The chamber hums softly with the weight of unseen history, and a gentle breeze stirs, carrying whispers that tease the imagination without ever revealing secrets. To the left, a spiral staircase leads upward, slick with moss and moisture. You ascend slowly, careful with each step, feeling the worn stone under your palms. Faint carvings along the walls depict robed figures, abstract celestial symbols, and small animals intertwined in patterns. Myths suggest these carvings were meant to guide initiates through sacred rituals, though their exact purpose remains speculative. Researchers still argue whether the spiral served a functional or symbolic role in the temple's design, and this subtle tension invites a soft, contemplative thrill as you climb. Reaching the upper terrace, you step onto cracked flagstones dappled with sunlight. Broken pillars rise around you, partially shrouded in curling mist. The air is cool and scented with wet stone and faint vegetation, blending seamlessly into the gentle warmth of filtered sunlight. Shadows stretch lazily across fractured walls, forming ephemeral patterns that seem alive for a fleeting moment. Before fading, you trace the moss along a railing with your fingertips, feeling its soft texture contrast with the hard, cold stone beneath, and imagine the ceremonies and steps once performed here, long vanished from memory. In a far corner, a shallow basin collects rainwater, its surface broken but reflective. Sunlight catches the water in fleeting patterns, illuminating fragments of mosaics embedded in the stone floor, muted reds, pale blues, and ochres forming abstract shapes. The myth claims these basins were used to glimpse visions of the past, though no one can confirm the tale. You dip a finger into the water, sending ripples across the reflected light, and watch as patterns shift and merge with shadows cast from distant broken pillars. Researchers still debate whether these reflections had practical or ritual significance, yet the gentle interplay of light and water is hypnotic. A low alcove near the terrace's edge contains a cracked idol, partially draped in ivy. Its serene expression seems to observe your presence, silent but knowing. Myths claim the idol held protective power over hidden relics, and you brush away creeping moss to reveal faint inscriptions at its base. You feel the rough texture, the coolness beneath your fingers, and notice the subtle glint of embedded minerals catching sunlight. Shadows flicker across its face, creating the illusion of movement that draws a soft smile from your lips. A narrow corridor leads from the terrace to another chamber, dimly lit by sunlight filtering through high cracks. The floor is uneven, strewn with small stones and moss, creating soft, audible crunches with each careful step. Carvings along the walls depict human and animal figures engaged in ritual activity, interlaced with abstract symbols whose meaning has faded with time. Myths suggest they were guides for ceremonial observances, while researchers still argue whether they served symbolic or instructional purposes. You run a finger along a particularly intricate motif, feeling subtle indentations and imagining the hands that etched them centuries ago. The chamber opens into a small courtyard, half collapsed yet alive with creeping vegetation. Broken columns and stone fragments rise amid patches of moss, dappled in sunlight that shifts subtly as clouds pass overhead. You inhale the mingling scents of damp stone and wildflowers, letting them ground you in the quiet present as your imagination drifts across centuries of human activity. Shadows stretch across the ground in fleeting, ephemeral shapes, giving the sense that figures are moving in the ruins, even though the space is empty. A partially hidden staircase leads downward from the courtyard into a shadowed chamber. The cool air is rich with the scent of earth and mineral-laden water. Light filters through narrow cracks, illuminating faint carvings of robed figures and abstract patterns that twist along the walls. Legends claim these carvings were part of a secret initiation ritual, though evidence remains inconclusive. Researchers still debate their purpose, whether functional, symbolic, or both, adding a subtle thrill to your quiet observation. In the chamber's center lies a small, cracked basin filled with water, reflecting faint sunlight and fragments of mosaics embedded in the stone floor. You dip a finger lightly into the water, sending gentle ripples across the surface, watching reflections scatter in mesmerizing patterns. The myth suggests these basins once allowed glimpses into sacred truths, though no verification exists. Shadows dance along the walls with each ripple, creating fleeting illusions of movement that make you pause, savoring the delicate tension and quiet mystery. Toward the far wall, a narrow doorway opens into a spiral staircase ascending to an upper gallery. Moss covers the edges of each step, and the air carries faint floral notes mingled with damp stone. You ascend slowly, fingers brushing along textured walls with carvings of human-animal hybrid forms and celestial symbols. The myth claims these stairs led to a hidden observatory, yet no record exists. Researchers still argue whether the gallery served practical, ceremonial, or symbolic purposes, leaving the intrigue suspended in the air. Emerging onto the upper gallery, you find a long terrace overlooking scattered ruins, partially shrouded in morning mist. Broken pillars and remnants of collapsed walls form jagged silhouettes against the soft sunlight. The air carries the delicate scent of moss, whetstone, and distant blooms. Shadows stretch and twist along fractured surfaces, forming fleeting, ephemeral figures that dissolve as quickly as they appear. You lean against a cool railing, feeling the smooth stone beneath your fingers, observing every subtle flicker of light, shadow, and movement. At the far terrace corner, a small alcove contains a moss-covered statue, its features softened, yet still emanating serene presence. You approach quietly, brushing away creeping vines to reveal faint details. Legends suggest the statue was a silent guardian of sacred relics, though no one can confirm this. You run your fingers along the worn stone, feeling subtle grooves and depressions, and notice the sunlight catching tiny mineral deposits, creating soft glimmers. Shadows flicker around the statue, forming the illusion of a gentle nod or blink, teasing your imagination in the most subtle way. Finally, the terrace corridor narrows, leading to a partially hidden passage veiled behind fallen stones. The light dims softly as you approach, the air cool and tinged with earth and moss. You pause at the threshold, sensing the lingering pulse of the ruins and the quiet anticipation of what lies beyond. A soft breeze brushes past your cheek, carrying the faintest whisper of secrets yet to be revealed. You step forward silently, drawn deeper into the temple's mysteries, curious about what hidden wonders await in the shadows beyond. You glide silently through the hidden passage, the air cooler and slightly damp, carrying the subtle scent of wet stone and distant foliage. Light from above filters through tiny cracks, scattering in gentle patterns across the rough floor. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the soft interplay of shadow, stone, and drifting dust hums with centuries of silent observation. Each step resonates faintly, a whisper of sound that echoes softly, reminding you of the countless footsteps that came before yours. The corridor opens into a vaulted chamber, partially collapsed at one end, allowing sunbeams to illuminate fragments of intricate carvings on the walls. A faint floral scent mingles with damp earth, creating a calm, grounding aroma. In the center, a cracked pedestal rises, upon which rests a small, eroded statue of an enigmatic figure. Legends claim this figure was once a guardian of sacred knowledge, silently watching over rituals long forgotten. Researchers still argue whether it marked a ceremonial site or merely a decorative focal point, adding a quiet thrill of uncertainty to your silent observation. Along the chamber walls, you notice niches containing broken pottery, corroded metal fragments, and faded stone carvings. The textures are varied: smooth pottery, rough stone, and eroded carvings that hint at once intricate designs. Myths suggest these objects were offerings to deities of fertility, and protection, though no evidence confirms specific rituals. You kneel to examine a small shard, feeling the delicate curves and sharp edges beneath your fingertips. The chamber hums softly with unseen history, and a subtle draft carries whispers of wind through cracks, teasing your imagination without ever revealing secrets. To your left, a narrow spiral staircase descends into a lower, waterlogged chamber. Each step is slick with moss, cool under your fingers. Faint carvings trace the walls along the staircase, abstract human forms, celestial symbols, and intertwined animals. Myths suggest these symbols guided initiates through ritualistic paths, though the exact meaning has been lost. Researchers still debate whether the carvings served functional, symbolic, or purely decorative purposes. You descend slowly, attuned to the soft echo of water dripping from distant cracks and the gentle, hypnotic rhythm of your own careful movements. At the base, the chamber opens into a partially submerged hall. Cool water laps at your ankles, reflecting the fractured sunlight streaming in from above. Tiny mosaics peek from beneath the water, muted reds, pale blues, and ochres forming abstract patterns that shift with the ripples. Legends suggest these mosaics encoded sacred knowledge or maps of celestial events, yet no verification exists. You watch the shifting reflections, allowing the gentle interplay of light and water to mesmerize your senses. Shadows flicker at the edges of your vision, forming fleeting shapes that vanish when looked at directly, teasing your imagination. Toward the back of the chamber, a cracked stone basin sits partially submerged, etched with faint, weathered symbols. You trace the grooves with your fingertips, feeling subtle ridges and depressions. The myth says that under specific celestial alignments, the basin could reveal visions of ancient ceremonies, though no evidence supports this. Researchers still argue whether these basins were functional, symbolic, or purely ritualistic. You dip a finger lightly into the water, watching ripples distort the reflected mosaics, a gentle sensory interplay of light, texture, and sound that feels almost meditative. Along the chamber's side, a low doorway opens into a narrow corridor, ascending gradually. The walls are slick with moss, and the air is cool with a faint mineral scent. Tiny carvings line the passage, abstract robed figures, celestial symbols, and small animals intertwined in complex patterns. Myths suggest these carvings offered guidance to temple initiates, while researchers continue to debate their functional or symbolic purpose. You move slowly, fingers brushing the textured stone, letting your awareness absorb the tactile nuances, the faint scent of damp stone, and the soft echoes of dripping water. Emerging into a terrace, you find broken pillars scattered across sun-dappled flagstones. Mist curls lazily across the edges, refracting sunlight into a soft, golden haze. The terrace smells faintly of wet stone and overgrown vegetation. Shadows stretch across the fractured walls, forming ephemeral patterns that suggest movement. You trail your fingers along a moss-covered railing, feeling the contrast between soft moss and hard stone, imagining the ceremonial activity that may have taken place here centuries ago. A small alcove at the terrace edge contains a weathered statue partially covered in creeping vines. Its expression is serene, timeless, observing silently. Legends say it was a guardian of sacred relics. You brush the moss aside to reveal faint carvings along its base and run your fingers over the stone's rough surface, noting subtle mineral glints that catch the sunlight. Shadows flicker, forming illusions of movement, a playful dance of light and stone that draws a soft, quiet smile. You follow a narrow corridor from the terrace toward an inner chamber. The floor is uneven, strewn with small stones and moss. Light filters through narrow cracks, illuminating fragments of mosaics embedded in the stone walls, muted reds, blues, and ochres forming abstract geometric shapes. Myths claim these mosaics were ritual guides, but no proof exists. Researchers still argue about their exact function, blending practical and symbolic purposes. You trace the mosaic patterns with your eyes, letting your imagination complete the unfinished narrative. In the inner chamber, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting shards of sunlight and portions of the ceiling's carved motifs. You watch ripples distort the reflections, a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. Legends suggest the water offered glimpses into sacred knowledge during ceremonies, though no evidence confirms this. Shadows dance across the walls, creating ephemeral shapes that tease your imagination. The interplay of sight, touch, and sound envelops you, blending the past and present in a subtle, sensory lull. A narrow staircase ascends from the chamber to a higher gallery, its edges slick with moss. You climb carefully, feeling the cool, rough stone beneath your palms. Tiny carvings line the walls, abstract figures, animals, and celestial symbols. Myths suggest the gallery served as an observatory, though no verification exists. Researchers debate its purpose, and the uncertainty adds a gentle thrill to your quiet observation. At the top, a terrace opens with scattered ruins partially shrouded in soft mist. Broken pillars and fractured walls form jagged silhouettes against muted sunlight. The air carries the scent of moss, wet stone, and distant blooms. Shadows twist along broken surfaces, forming ephemeral, almost ghost-like figures. You lean against the cool stone, taking in the scene, feeling the gentle rhythm of air, scent, and light, absorbing the serenity and subtle tension that the ruins offer. Finally, a narrow corridor veiled by fallen stones hints at deeper chambers. The light dims, and the air carries the faint aroma of earth and moss. You pause, feeling the lingering pulse of history and the gentle thrill of curiosity. A soft draft brushes your cheek, as if the ruins themselves are urging you forward. You step silently, drawn into the mysteries ahead, ready to continue your quiet, invisible exploration into forgotten spaces. You step through the hidden corridor, the air growing cooler and carrying a subtle damp scent that mixes with faint hints of wildflowers. Sunlight filters through thin cracks above, casting fragmented patterns across the stone floor. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the soft play of shadow and light, combined with drifting dust, hums with centuries of quiet observation. Each careful step sends a muted echo through the chamber, reminding you that countless footsteps have traversed this path long before yours. The corridor opens into a high vaulted hall, partially collapsed, allowing sunlight to dance across fragments of faded carvings. In the center stands a cracked pedestal holding an eroded statue, its features softened but serene. Legends say this figure once served as a silent guardian of sacred knowledge, its gaze keeping watch over centuries of ritual and mystery. Researchers still argue whether it was intended for ceremonial guidance or purely decorative purposes, the uncertainty deepening the quiet thrill of your invisible presence. Along the walls, small alcoves contain shards of pottery, corroded metallic artifacts, and fragments of carvings. The scent of damp stone mingles with the faint aroma of distant flora. You crouch, brushing moss aside to reveal subtle textures, feeling smooth pottery edges and jagged stone. Myths claim these objects were offerings to protect the temple, though their exact function remains unverified. The soft echo of your movements merges with distant dripping water, creating a gentle ASMR-like rhythm that pulls you deeper into the space. To your left, a spiral staircase descends, slick with moss and moisture. Each step is worn by centuries, cold under your hands. Faint carvings trace the walls, robed figures, abstract celestial symbols, and intertwined animals. Legends suggest these images guided initiates through sacred rituals, though scholars debate their precise role. You descend slowly, fingers brushing textured stone, attentive to the subtle interplay of light, shadow, and tactile sensation. The quiet tension is soothing, almost hypnotic. At the base, a waterlogged chamber unfolds. Cool water laps at your ankles, reflecting sunlight from above. Tiny mosaics peek from beneath the surface, reds, blues, and ochres forming abstract patterns that shift with each ripple. Myths claim these mosaics mapped celestial events or sacred knowledge, though evidence is speculative. You watch the reflected light dance on the walls, the patterns shifting with water movement, shadows creating fleeting illusions that tease your imagination. A cracked stone basin rests in the chamber's center, partially submerged, etched with faint symbols. You trace the grooves with your fingertips, feeling subtle indentations. Legends say that during celestial alignments, the basin could reveal visions of ancient ceremonies. Researchers still argue whether the basin had practical or symbolic significance. You dip a finger lightly, watching ripples scatter across mosaics, blending reflection and shadow into a soft, meditative rhythm. Along the chamber's side, a low doorway leads to an ascending corridor. The floor is mossy and uneven, each step producing a gentle crunch. Carvings line the walls, abstract human figures, animals, and celestial patterns. Legends claim these guided ritual initiates, though their exact meaning remains uncertain. Researchers debate the practical versus symbolic purpose. You follow, slowly, fingers brushing stone textures, absorbing tactile sensations, faint scents, and soft, ambient echoes. Emerging onto a terrace, broken pillars and scattered stones rise among curling mist. Sunlight refracts into a warm golden glow, blending with cool air, scented faintly with moss and wildflowers. Shadows stretch across fractured walls, forming ephemeral patterns that suggest movement. You trail your fingertips along a moss-covered railing, imagining ceremonies that once played out here centuries ago. A small alcove contains a moss-draped statue, its serene features observing silently. Legends suggest it guarded sacred relics, though verification is lacking. You brush moss aside, feeling the subtle stone texture and noting glimmers of embedded minerals catching sunlight. Shadows flicker, forming fleeting illusions of motion, a quiet playfulness in the ruined silence. A narrow corridor from the terrace leads to an inner chamber. The floor is uneven, strewn with stones and moss. Light filters through cracks, illuminating mosaics along the walls. Muted reds, blues, and ochres forming abstract geometric shapes. Legends claim they were ritual guides. Researchers debate their purpose. You trace the patterns with your eyes, letting imagination fill the narrative. Inside the chamber, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting sunlight and fragments of carvings on the ceiling. You watch gentle ripples distort reflections, creating a soothing visual rhythm. Legends suggest glimpses into sacred knowledge were possible here, though no evidence confirms it. Shadows dance along walls, teasing your imagination. The interplay of sight, touch, and sound forming a soft ASMR cadence. A spiral staircase ascends to a higher gallery. Moss covers the steps, cool beneath your fingers. Carvings line the walls, abstract human-animal hybrids and celestial symbols. Myths claim it was an observatory. Researchers debate its function. The uncertainty adds gentle thrill to your quiet exploration. At the upper gallery, scattered ruins lie partially shrouded in mist. Broken pillars and fractured walls form jagged silhouettes against muted sunlight. The air carries moss, wet stone, and distant blooms. Shadows twist along broken surfaces, forming ephemeral shapes that dissolve as quickly as they appear. You lean against cool stone, absorbing light, shadow, and scent, the calm pulse of centuries settling around you. Finally, a partially hidden corridor veiled by fallen stones hints at deeper chambers. The light dims, the air cool and earthy. You pause, feeling the lingering pulse of the ruins and a gentle curiosity urging you forward. A soft breeze brushes your cheek as if the temple itself whispers secrets. You step silently, drawn into the mysteries ahead, ready to continue the exploration. You slip quietly down the shadowed corridor, the air cool and heavy with the scent of damp stone and faint earth. Tiny cracks above let in delicate beams of sunlight, which scatter across the worn floor in shifting patterns. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke. Yet the subtle interplay of light and shadow, dust and stone, hums softly with centuries of silent witness. Every careful step resonates faintly, blending into the echo of dripping water and distant rustling, a gentle cadence guiding your invisible passage. The corridor opens into a vaulted chamber, partially collapsed at one end. Sunlight spills across eroded carvings along the walls. Abstract robed figures, celestial symbols, and interlaced animals, each worn smooth by time. In the center rests a fractured pedestal, topped with a weathered statue whose serene expression seems to follow your movements. Legends speak of this figure as a guardian of ancient rites, silently observing centuries of ceremonies long forgotten. Researchers still argue whether it was functional, symbolic, or decorative, the mystery adding a subtle thrill to your quiet observation. Along the walls, small niches reveal broken pottery, rusted metal fragments, and faded stone carvings. The damp air carries faint floral and mineral notes, grounding you in the moment. You brush moss and silt aside, feeling textures beneath your fingertips. Smooth ceramic, rough stone, and eroded patterns hinting at lost artistry. Myths claim these objects were offerings to deities of protection or fertility, though no record confirms it. The soft echo of water droplets and distant wind mingles with the sensation of texture, creating a hypnotic, almost ASMR-like rhythm. To your left, a spiral staircase descends into a lower chamber, partially submerged in water. Each worn step is slick with moss and cool beneath your hands. Faint carvings line the walls, abstract figures, celestial motifs, and intertwined animals. Legends suggest they guided initiates through sacred rituals, while researchers still debate their function. You descend slowly, attuned to subtle sounds of dripping water and faint drafts, each sense heightened in the quiet, shadowed space. At the base, the chamber opens into a shallow, waterlogged hall. Cool water laps at your ankles, reflecting fractured sunlight. Tiny mosaics embedded in the stone shift and shimmer as ripples distort their muted reds, blues, and ochres. Myths claim these mosaics charted celestial movements or sacred knowledge, though proof is lacking. You watch reflections dance across the water, shadows flickering at the edges, fleeting shapes teasing your imagination. A cracked basin rests at the chamber's center, etched with faded symbols. You run your fingers along grooves worn smooth by time. Legends say the basin could reveal glimpses of ancient rituals when touched during celestial alignments. Researchers still argue its purpose: functional, symbolic, or both, leaving an aura of gentle mystery. You dip a fingertip into the water, ripples scattering across mosaics, blending light, shadow, and reflection into a meditative, sensory experience. Along one side, a low doorway leads upward into a narrow corridor. The floor is mossy and uneven, crunching softly underfoot. Carvings trace walls, robed figures, abstract symbols, and animals interwoven in delicate patterns. Legends claim these carvings instructed ritual movement. Researchers debate their practical versus symbolic role. You follow slowly, hands brushing textures, absorbing tactile, visual, and olfactory cues, letting the quiet cadence of stone and air lull you deeper into contemplation. Emerging onto a terrace, broken pillars and scattered stones rise among curling mist. Sunlight refracts through the haze, bathing the space in soft gold. The air is a mix of moss, wet stone, and distant blooms. Shadows stretch across fractured walls, forming ephemeral, shifting patterns that suggest movement. You trail your fingers along moss-covered stone, imagining rituals that once moved through this space. In a small alcove, a moss-draped statue gazes silently. Legends suggest it guarded sacred relics. You brush away vines, feeling subtle grooves in the eroded stone and catching glimmers of embedded mineral deposits. Shadows flicker, forming fleeting illusions of life. A quiet, playful dance of light and imagination. A narrow corridor leads from the terrace into an inner chamber. The floor is uneven, stones scattered and moss covered. Light filters through cracks, illuminating mosaics, muted reds, blues, ochres, forming geometric patterns. Legends suggest these guided rituals. Researchers debate their exact function. You trace the patterns with your eyes, letting imagination complete the story the stone leaves unfinished. Within the chamber, a shallow basin reflects sunlight and ceiling carvings. Gentle ripples scatter reflections across walls, creating a soothing visual rhythm. Myths claim the water could reveal hidden truths, though no proof exists. Shadows dance subtly, teasing imagination, as the combined sensations of sight, touch, and ambient sound form a soft ASMR pulse. A spiral staircase ascends to a higher gallery, moss covering each worn step. Walls are etched with abstract human-animal hybrids and celestial symbols. Myths suggest the gallery was a secret observatory. Researchers debate this claim. The uncertainty adds quiet intrigue as you ascend, each step guided by gentle curiosity. At the gallery, ruins scatter partially shrouded in mist. Broken pillars, fractured walls, and distant terraces form jagged silhouettes under muted sunlight. The air carries moss, wet stone, and floral scents. Shadows twist across broken surfaces, forming ephemeral, fleeting shapes. You lean against cool stone, absorbing light, scent, and shadow, the ruins' quiet rhythm settling around you. Finally, a veiled corridor, partially blocked by fallen stones, hints at deeper chambers. The light softens, the air earthy and cool. You pause, sensing the pulse of the ruins and the gentle pull of curiosity. A soft draft brushes your cheek, carrying whispers of untold secrets. You step forward silently, drawn deeper into the temple's mysteries, ready for the next hidden space to unfold. You move silently through the narrow, shadowed corridor, the air cooler now, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp stone mixed with distant floral notes. Sunlight filters sparingly through cracks above, casting fractured beams that shimmer on the uneven floor. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the gentle interplay of light, shadow, and drifting dust whispers centuries of quiet observation. Each step produces a muted echo, a soft rhythm that blends seamlessly with distant dripping water and the faint rustle of unseen leaves. The corridor opens into a high, vaulted chamber, partially collapsed at one end. Sunlight spills across faded carvings etched into the walls, robed figures, celestial symbols, and intertwined animals. In the center stands a cracked pedestal, topped with a worn statue whose serene expression seems aware of your invisible presence. Legends speak of this figure as a guardian of sacred knowledge, silently watching rituals lost to memory. Researchers still argue whether it marked a ceremonial site or merely served as decoration, and this ambiguity adds a quiet, thrilling tension to your hidden exploration. Small niches along the walls reveal broken pottery, rusted metal fragments, and eroded stone carvings. The scent of damp earth mingles with faint floral notes, grounding your senses in the quiet present. You brush moss aside, feeling textures beneath your fingertips, smooth pottery, rough stone, and subtle grooves hinting at lost artistry. Myths claim these objects were offerings to deities of fertility or protection, though no records confirm specifics. The soft echo of dripping water and distant wind merges with the tactile experience, creating a hypnotic ASMR-like rhythm that carries you deeper into the ruins. To your left, a spiral staircase descends into a lower chamber, partially submerged in water. Each step is slick with moss, cool beneath your palms. Faint carvings trace the walls, abstract human forms, celestial motifs, and interwoven animals. Myths suggest these symbols guided initiates through sacred rituals, while researchers still debate their purpose. You descend slowly, attuned to subtle echoes and gentle drafts, every sense heightened in the quiet, shadowed space. At the base, the chamber opens into a shallow, waterlogged hall. Cool water laps gently at your ankles, reflecting fractured sunlight. Tiny mosaics peek from beneath the surface, muted reds, pale blues, and ochres, forming shifting abstract patterns. Legends claim these mosaics charted celestial movements or sacred knowledge, though no evidence confirms it. You watch the rippling reflections, shadows flickering at the edges, fleeting shapes teasing your imagination. A cracked stone basin rests at the chamber's center, etched with faded symbols. You run your fingers along the worn grooves, feeling the subtle indentations. Legends say that during celestial alignments, the basin could reveal visions of ancient ceremonies. Researchers still argue its purpose: functional, symbolic, or both, leaving a quiet aura of mystery. You dip a fingertip into the water, ripples scattering across mosaics, blending light, shadow, and reflection into a meditative rhythm. Along one wall, a narrow doorway leads upward into a mossy corridor. The floor is uneven, the crunch of small stones soft beneath your footsteps. Carvings trace the walls, robed figures, abstract patterns, and animals intertwined in complex designs. Myths suggest these carvings instructed ritual movement, while researchers debate whether they served practical or symbolic functions. You follow slowly, letting your fingers trace textures, absorbing the combination of tactile, visual, and olfactory cues, the quiet cadence of stone and air guiding you. Emerging onto a terrace, broken pillars and scattered stones rise among curling mist. Sunlight refracts softly, bathing the space in a warm, golden glow. The air is scented faintly with moss, wet stone, and distant wildflowers. Shadows stretch across fractured walls, forming ephemeral patterns that seem to shift with the breeze. You trail your fingers along moss-covered stone, imagining ceremonies once performed here, the silence holding the echoes of countless untold stories. A small alcove holds a moss-draped statue, its features serene, observing silently. Legends claim it guarded sacred relics, though verification is lacking. You brush away creeping vines to reveal delicate grooves and subtle mineral flecks catching the light. Shadows flicker, forming fleeting illusions of life, a quiet, playful dance of stone and imagination. A narrow corridor leads from the terrace into an inner chamber. The floor is uneven, stones scattered and moss-covered. Light filters through cracks, illuminating mosaics along the walls, muted reds, blues, ochres, forming abstract geometric shapes. Legends suggest these mosaics guided ritual movements, though researchers debate their precise purpose. You follow the patterns with your eyes, letting imagination fill the spaces left by time. Within the chamber, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting sunlight and fragments of ceiling carvings. Gentle ripples distort reflections across walls, creating a soothing visual rhythm. Myths claim the water revealed hidden truths, though no proof exists. Shadows dance subtly along the walls, teasing your imagination. The combination of sight, touch, and ambient sound forms a delicate ASMR-like pulse that slows your awareness, grounding you in the present while echoing the past. A spiral staircase ascends to a higher gallery, moss covering each worn step. Walls are etched with abstract human-animal hybrids and celestial symbols. Myths suggest the gallery served as a secret observatory. Researchers debate this claim. The uncertainty adds gentle intrigue as you ascend, each step a soft, measured rhythm of exploration. At the gallery, scattered ruins lie partially shrouded in mist. Broken pillars, fractured walls, and distant terraces form jagged silhouettes under muted sunlight. The air carries moss, wet stone, and the faint scent of blooms. Shadows twist across surfaces, forming fleeting, ephemeral figures. You lean against the cool stone, absorbing light, scent, and shadow, feeling the ruins' quiet rhythm settling around you. Finally, a partially hidden corridor veiled by fallen stones, hints at deeper chambers. The light softens, the air earthy and cool. You pause, sensing the pulse of the ruins and a gentle curiosity tugging you forward. A soft draft brushes your cheek as if the temple itself whispers secrets. You step silently, drawn deeper into the hidden mysteries, anticipation threading through every subtle sense. If you're still awake, let me know in the comments. Or maybe you've already drifted halfway. You glide quietly through the narrow, shadowed corridor, the air carrying the cool, damp scent of stone mixed with faint traces of moss and wildflowers. Sunlight filters through tiny cracks above, scattering delicate patterns across the uneven floor. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the interplay of light, shadow, and drifting dust hums softly with centuries of silent observation. Each step echoes gently, blending with distant dripping water and the faint rustle of unseen foliage, forming a soft, hypnotic rhythm that guides you deeper. The corridor opens into a vaulted chamber, partially collapsed at one end. Sunlight spills across worn carvings on the walls, robed figures, celestial symbols, and interlaced animals, their details softened by time. At the center, a cracked pedestal holds a weathered statue, its serene gaze following your invisible movements. Legends speak of this figure as a guardian of sacred knowledge, silently observing centuries of rituals now forgotten. Researchers still argue whether it served a ceremonial or purely decorative purpose, adding a subtle tension to your quiet exploration. Small alcoves line the walls, revealing shards of pottery, rusted metal fragments, and faded carvings. The damp air carries hints of floral and earthy scents, grounding your senses in the present. You brush moss aside, feeling smooth pottery, rough stone, and faintly grooved patterns that hint at lost artistry. Myths claim these objects were offerings to deities of protection or fertility, though no evidence confirms it. The soft echoes of dripping water and distant wind merge with tactile sensations, creating a gentle ASMR-like cadence. To your left, a spiral staircase descends into a partially submerged chamber. Each step is slick with moss, cold under your fingers. Faint carvings trace the walls, abstract human forms, celestial motifs, and intertwined animals. Myths suggest these guided initiates through sacred rituals, while researchers continue to debate their purpose. You descend slowly, attuned to soft echoes and gentle drafts, every sense heightened in the shadowed space. At the base, a shallow, waterlogged hall stretches before you. Cool water laps at your ankles, reflecting fragmented sunlight. Tiny mosaics peek from beneath the surface, muted reds, pale blues, and ochres forming shifting abstract patterns. Legends claim these mosaics charted celestial movements or sacred knowledge, though evidence is speculative. You watch reflections ripple and flicker, shadows at the edges forming fleeting illusions that tease your imagination. A cracked stone basin sits at the chamber's center, etched with faint symbols. You run your fingers along grooves worn smooth by centuries. Myths suggest that during celestial alignments, the basin could reveal visions of ancient ceremonies. Researchers still argue its function, practical, symbolic, or both, leaving a gentle aura of mystery. You dip a fingertip into the water, sending soft ripples across mosaics, blending light, shadow, and reflection into a meditative rhythm. Along the chamber wall, a low doorway leads upward into a mossy corridor. The floor is uneven, crunching softly underfoot. Carvings line the walls, robed figures, abstract patterns, and animals intertwined in delicate motifs. Legends claim these inscriptions guided ritual movement, while researchers debate their practical versus symbolic purpose. You move slowly, fingers brushing the textured stone, absorbing tactile, visual, and olfactory cues, the quiet cadence of stone and air guiding you. Emerging onto a terrace, broken pillars and scattered stones rise through curling mist. Sunlight refracts softly, bathing the space in warm golden light. The air carries the scent of moss, whetstone, and distant blooms. Shadows stretch across fractured walls, forming ephemeral patterns that shift subtly. You trail your fingertips along moss-covered stone, imagining the rituals once performed here, the silence holding echoes of untold stories. A small alcove contains a moss-draped statue, its serene expression watching silently. Legends say it guarded sacred relics, though no verification exists. You brush away vines, feeling subtle stone textures and glimpsing mineral flecks catching the light. Shadows flicker, forming fleeting illusions of motion, a quiet, playful dance of light and imagination. A narrow corridor leads from the terrace into an inner chamber. The floor is uneven, scattered with mossy stones. Light filters through cracks, illuminating mosaics, muted reds, blues, and ochres forming geometric patterns. Legends suggest these mosaics guided ritual movements. Researchers debate their precise purpose. You trace the shapes with your eyes, letting imagination complete what time has eroded. Within the chamber, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting sunlight and fragments of ceiling carvings. Gentle ripples distort reflections across the walls, creating a soothing visual rhythm. Myths suggest the water revealed hidden truths, though proof is lacking. Shadows dance subtly, teasing your imagination. Sight, touch, and ambient sound converge in a soft, ASMR-like pulse, grounding you while echoing centuries of quiet activity. A spiral staircase ascends to a higher gallery, moss covering each worn step. Walls are etched with abstract human-animal hybrids and celestial symbols. Myths suggest the gallery served as a secret observatory. Researchers debate this claim. The uncertainty adds quiet intrigue as you ascend, each step measured, attentive, and calm. At the gallery, scattered ruins lie partially shrouded in mist. Broken pillars and fractured walls form jagged silhouettes against muted sunlight. The air carries moss, whetstone, and faint floral scents. Shadows twist across broken surfaces, ephemeral and fleeting. You lean against cool stone, absorbing light, scent, and shadow, the quiet rhythm of the ruins settling around you. Finally, a veiled corridor, partially blocked by fallen stones, hints at deeper chambers. Light softens, the air earthy and cool. You pause, sensing the pulse of the ruins and a gentle curiosity tugging you forward. A soft draft brushes your cheek, as if the temple itself is whispering. You step forward silently, drawn into the mysteries yet unseen, anticipation threading through every subtle sense. If you're still awake, let me know in the comments. Or perhaps you've already drifted halfway through tonight's journey. You step carefully into the shadowed corridor, the air cooler now, carrying the earthy scent of damp stone mingled with faint traces of moss and distant wildflowers. Sunlight filters sparingly through tiny cracks above, scattering delicate beams that dance across the worn floor. You wouldn't believe the stories these walls could tell if they spoke, yet the interplay of light, shadow, and drifting dust hums softly with centuries of silent observation. Each footstep echoes gently, blending with distant dripping water and the soft rustle of leaves beyond, forming a hypnotic rhythm that guides your invisible journey. The corridor opens into a high vaulted chamber, partially collapsed at one end. Sunlight spills across faded carvings etched into the walls, robed figures, celestial motifs, and intertwined animals, their edges softened by time. In the center, a cracked pedestal supports a weathered statue, serene and unreadable. Legends speak of this figure as a guardian of sacred knowledge, silently observing rituals lost to memory. Researchers still argue whether it served a ceremonial, symbolic, or decorative purpose, the ambiguity adding a gentle thrill to your quiet exploration. Along the walls, small niches reveal broken pottery, rusted metallic fragments, and eroded stone carvings. The damp air carries faint floral and earthy aromas, grounding your senses in the quiet present. You brush moss aside, feeling textures beneath your fingertips, smooth ceramics, rough stone, subtle grooves hinting at artistry now forgotten. Myths claim these objects were offerings to deities of fertility or protection, though no records confirm specifics. The soft echoes of water droplets and distant wind merge with the tactile experience, creating a soothing ASMR-like cadence. To your left, a spiral staircase descends into a lower, partially submerged chamber. Each worn step is slick with moss, cool beneath your hands. Faint carvings trace the walls, abstract figures, celestial symbols, and intertwined animals. Legends suggest these guided initiates through sacred rituals, while researchers continue to debate their purpose. You descend slowly, attuned to subtle echoes and gentle drafts, every sense heightened in the shadowed space. At the base, a shallow, waterlogged hall stretches before you. Cool water laps gently at your ankles, reflecting fragmented sunlight. Tiny mosaics peek from beneath the surface, muted reds, pale blues, and ochres forming shifting abstract patterns. Legends claim these mosaics charted celestial movements or sacred knowledge, though evidence remains unverified. You watch reflections ripple and flicker, shadows at the edges forming ephemeral illusions, teasing your imagination. A cracked stone basin rests at the chamber's center, etched with faint symbols. You trace the worn grooves with your fingers, feeling subtle indentations. Legends say that during celestial alignments, the basin could reveal visions of ancient ceremonies. Researchers still argue its function, practical, symbolic, or both, leaving a quiet aura of mystery. You dip a fingertip into the water, ripples scattering across mosaics, blending light, shadow, and reflection into a meditative, sensory rhythm. Along one wall, a low doorway leads upward into a mossy corridor. The floor is uneven, crunching softly beneath your footsteps. Carvings line the walls, robed figures, abstract patterns, and interwoven animals. Legends suggest these inscriptions guided ritual movement. Researchers debate their practical versus symbolic role. You follow slowly, fingers brushing textures, absorbing tactile, visual, and olfactory cues, the cadence of stone and air, guiding your pace. Emerging onto a terrace, broken pillars and scattered stones rise amid curling mist. Sunlight refracts softly, bathing the space in warm, golden light. The air carries faint scents of moss, wet stone, and distant blooms. Shadows stretch across fractured walls, forming ephemeral patterns that shift subtly. You trail your fingertips along moss-covered stone, imagining ceremonies once performed here, the silence holding echoes of countless untold stories. A small alcove houses a moss-draped statue, its serene expression silently observing. Legends say it guarded sacred relics, though verification is lacking. You brush away creeping vines, feeling subtle grooves in the eroded stone and glimpsing tiny mineral flecks catching the light. Shadows flicker, forming fleeting illusions of motion, a quiet, playful dance of imagination and history. A narrow corridor leads from the terrace into an inner chamber. The floor is uneven, stones scattered and moss-covered. Light filters through cracks, illuminating mosaics along the walls, muted reds, blues, and ochres forming geometric patterns. Legends suggest these mosaics guided ritual movements. Researchers debate their precise purpose. You follow the shapes with your eyes, letting imagination complete the story left unfinished by time. Inside the chamber, a shallow basin collects rainwater, reflecting sunlight and fragments of ceiling carvings. Gentle ripples distort reflections across walls, creating a soothing visual rhythm. Myths suggest the water revealed hidden truths, though proof is lacking. Shadows dance subtly, teasing your imagination. The combination of sight, touch, and ambient sound forms a delicate ASMR-like pulse, grounding you in the present while echoing centuries past. A spiral staircase ascends to a higher gallery, moss covering each worn step. Walls are etched with abstract human-animal hybrids and celestial symbols. Legends suggest the gallery served as a secret observatory. Researchers debate this claim. The uncertainty adds quiet intrigue as you ascend, each step measured, attentive, and calm. At the gallery, scattered ruins lie partially shrouded in mist. Broken pillars and fractured walls form jagged silhouettes under muted sunlight. The air carries moss, wet stone, and faint floral scents. Shadows twist across surfaces, ephemeral and fleeting. You lean against cool stone, absorbing light, scent, and shadow. The quiet rhythm of the ruins settling around you. Finally, a partially hidden corridor, veiled by fallen stones, hints at deeper chambers. Light softens, the air earthy and cool. You pause, sensing the pulse of the ruins and the gentle tug of curiosity. A soft draft brushes your cheek as if the temple itself is whispering. You step forward silently, drawn into the mysteries yet unseen, anticipation threading through every subtle sense. Now, as you linger in the deepest shadows, the temple's rhythm begins to slow. Each breath of wind, each flicker of light, carrying a softer cadence. The stones beneath your fingers feel warmer, more intimate, as if welcoming the day's end. Your steps have grown lighter, the echoes fading into the gentle hum of distant water and whispering air. The mosaics, the statues, the carved walls, they all blur softly into one seamless tapestry of past and present, their secrets lingering just at the edge of your perception. You notice the cool mist curling lazily across broken terraces, catching faint golden sunlight. The faint scent of moss and wildflowers drifts across the air, grounding you further. Shadows lengthen, stretching into gentle, amorphous shapes that dissolve as quickly as they form. Each carved figure, each fractured pillar, seems to breathe softly, their silent stories folding inward like a lullaby. You pause, inhaling the quiet history, exhaling your own awareness into the stillness. Time feels suspended here. Centuries condense into a soft, lingering now. The ripples of water, the faint scent of stone, and the whisper of air converge into a slow, meditative rhythm. Even the distant staircase seems less like a path and more like an invitation to drift further into reverie. The mysteries of the temple no longer need resolution. They exist as gentle questions, cradled in shadows and light, echoing softly around you. Your fingers brush one final moss-covered stone, a subtle warmth radiating through the surface. The light dims gradually, the shapes of statues and mosaics dissolving into soft forms. You take a deep breath, feeling the quiet pulse of the ruins syncing with your own, and with each heartbeat, the ancient echoes settle into a gentle lull. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let your mind drift. The temple, its shadows, and its stories are with you, softly, patiently, whispering the calm promise of wonder. End of script. Sweet dreams.